Okay. I thought I saw a sign that said Saul Anzus, and I think Anuzis, sorry. How are you? Mike Rogers with Granite Grok, Steve, Skip.
Hey, Saul. Have a seat. Put on a headset. I gotta tweet this.
You have, and you were here for a very specific purpose, Saul. I seem to remember that you were actually in. I've turned your microphone on. I think you should be live.
Okay.
Yeah. You were here to take part in a presentation or debate on. Was it
For today, you're thinking,
on
earlier?
On national popular vote?
National popular vote, right. We're on this afternoon.
Okay, so, and Aaron, are you just here as an attendee or you're a speaker?
I'm not speaking, but sponsoring and launching a contest.
Most excellent. Well, you can tell us about it, too. We'd love to hear. So, Saul, tell us a little bit about National Popular Vote and which side of it you're on and why.
Well, I'm actually in favor of National Popular Vote. So I believe that every vote in America ought to count. And today, unfortunately, whether we like it or not, we elect the president of the battleground states of America versus the president of the United States of America. 4 out of 5 Americans live in a state that is either decidedly Republican or decidedly Democrat, which means presidential candidates on both sides of the aisle don't pay attention to them. Mm-hmm. And, I started out, I was the chairman of the Republican Party in Michigan in 2008, and we were a purple state that can go red under the right circumstances. And late in the campaign, John McCain pulled out of Michigan, and our voter turnout and our interest in campaigns dropped from, where we basically went on the margin. We went by half point and a half if Michigan's going to go Republican, and we ended up going down to 40%. And we lost 2 members of Congress, 9 state legislators, a Supreme Court justice, and I just started looking for a better way of doing this, and this guy called me up and he said, have you ever heard this concept, National Popular Vote, which would make sure that every voter in all 50 states, plus the District of Columbia, vote would be counted, and you would allocate your delegates from the Electoral College delegates would be allocated based on the national popular vote versus a winner-take-all state by state. And that, by definition, would mean every state in America's votes would count. And we would run very different campaigns, and we'd appeal to people in America versus Iowa, Ohio, Florida, etc.
Right. Well, I'm actually a fan of the Electoral College.
As am I.
Yeah, the British system is first past the post on a district by district basis.
Right.
And the prime minister only gets to be the prime minister if he or she is the chosen one of the party, which has therefore the ultimate majority in Parliament after all of these one-by-one races. So, if we're going to look at varying it, the inverse of what you're suggesting is that we make every state run the races on a congressional district-by-district basis so that you get a whole bunch of first-past-the-post races so that each elector is individually chosen by a relatively consistent district, because it's about getting representation for the district. We've already diluted representation of the districts for senators, or representation of the states by senators. I'm very concerned that the national popular vote might actually have the same kind of bad effect, which is that it's essentially mob rule. You get 50% plus 1 vote, and you're the president, no matter what people in 30 states voted for example.
Well, yes and no. The quick answer is I think the congressional district plan would actually be worse than the current plan. Because basically what happens is that, if you take a look at the 435 congressional districts in this country, there's only about 50 or 60 that are competitive. And so if gerrymandering was relevant and important today for congressional elections, just imagine what they would be like in a presidential election. And what happens is that when you have that kind of system, you pervert public policy. I'll give you a classic example. In a congressional district plan, we would be worried about the Mayo Clinic in Minnesota, and the Mayo, where that district was, candidates would be pandering to the Mayo Clinic. Mm-hmm. Today, what happens is that we have ethanol because of Iowa, we have prescription D because of Florida, we have steel tariffs because of Pennsylvania. Why? Because they're swing states. So instead of appealing to the people of this entire country, instead of appealing to all of Americans, presidential candidates, Republicans or Democrats, pander to the states that matter at a given time. Now, swing states change over time, but if you take a look at, since 1988, as an example, we have spent 98% of all of our resources in 6 to 8 states every presidential election. And look, take a look at what President Obama did. When the president announced a stimulus package, okay, for the economy, whether we like it or not, but let's just look at the politics of it. The highest unemployment in the country was Rhode Island. Number 2 was my home state of Michigan. He skipped 3, 4, 5, and 6 and went to the 7th highest unemployment state in the country. Why? Because it was the first battleground state of Colorado and announced the stimulus package in Colorado. Not because they had double-digit unemployment. They were down to single-digit compared to Rhode Island and Michigan, but because they were a battleground state. When we had the oil spill in the Gulf of Mexico, it rolled up on the shores of Louisiana, solid Republican state. Page 6 of the New York Times, we've got a disaster, we've got to figure out what we're going to do. 3 days later, it rolls up on the shores of Mississippi. It's gone from page 6 to page 3. We've now found the spill. We know how to fix it. We know where we're going. On the 9th day, it rolled onto the shores of Florida. And what happened? The President of the United States landed a helicopter on the beaches of Florida and called it the greatest environmental disaster in the history of this country. What changed in those 9 days? We found the oil spill. We found the leak. We identified a solution, but it finally hit a swing state. And so if you look at the politics, we're distorting public policy, again, in a bipartisan way of going to the wrong people. We distort politics because we focus on those states, so the influence is different. And if you go back to what the founders intended, and you go back and read, for instance, Alexander Hamilton in 68, in Federalist 68 Papers, was very worried about a small group of states or a small group of cities at the time, and they were worried about Philadelphia, Boston, and New York, because the ponies could ride in between them and say, hey, we just cut a deal, and we're going to be supporting Aaron Day for president. So here's the deal, we cut it, and those
I
three
could
little...
live with that, by
I
the
could
way.
too, but that's a unique situation. Sometimes you would live with it, sometimes you wouldn't.
Not the kind of deal that they would go for, but we'd
but
go for it.
But you get the concept.
Yeah.
And today what's happening, it's a little bit of the opposite. When 4 out of 5 Americans don't live in states that matter, what happens is people just campaign in the states that do matter. And so look, the largest state in America is California.
Yeah.
Okay? Democrats or Republicans don't campaign in California. The only reason to go to California is an ATM for your campaigns. Texas is the largest Republican state. Not a Republican or Democrat goes and campaigns in the state of Texas, but they go there to raise money. So what happens is when you're talking about the issues that matter to you, when you're talking about the campaign, like for instance, I happen to serve on the NRA's National Board as Public Affairs Committee. NRA has 52 million identified Second Amendment rights supporters in the country. We probably don't turn out 20 million of them. Why? Because they're not in states that matter. They're not in swing states for a U.S. Senate race or a congressional seat or the presidential race. So if we were to change the system, I think what would happen is a couple things. One is every vote in the country, a vote in Michigan would be as relevant as a vote in Ohio and Florida. A vote in New Hampshire or anywhere else would be as relevant as a vote in Ohio or Florida. If you look at it from a liberty perspective, you look at it from a conservative perspective. I happen to be a Ted Cruz supporter for president. I take a look at what I'm a blue collar Reagan Democrat, union backed, non-country club Republican. When I ran for national chairman, I kind of went around the whole country and said, look, we get the country club Republicans. We need people who work for a living. We need people who are immigrants. We need people who can come in and change the way we do things. And I look at what a Ted Cruz can do, and I look at the kind of the political marketplace for him. It is the working class, blue collar, regular American who basically voted for Ronald Reagan in the 80s.
Yep.
And if those people are not necessarily who are in these swing states. I mean, why is Jeb Bush everyone's first choice today on the establishment wing? For one reason.
Money.
Florida.
Yeah.
It's Florida, because he can win Florida.
Name recognition, a swing state sewn up, and one of the biggest, if not the biggest, donor networks in the country.
Yeah, but if he wasn't in Florida, he wouldn't be anywhere near there. I mean, Scott Walker is interesting because Wisconsin could become a swing state with Scott Walker as the presidential candidate. So we instead of looking for the most consistently conservative candidate or the strongest candidate or however you want to define it, we go down to winnability, and then the establishment sits there and says, who can win a swing state like Ohio, or who could win a Florida, and that creates a different dynamic. And so again, I think we shortchange the American process.
Yeah.
As conservatives, we shortchange ourselves. I mean, we tend to look for more moderate candidates that can appeal to that squishy middle. that works up and down the I-75 corridor rather than saying, who can appeal to America?
Well, I think part of the thing that I'm trying to do here in New Hampshire is change the voter paradigm, which is, if you take the phrase, winning is only the precursor, it's what you do afterwards which is most
Sure.
important. A lot of Republicans, especially establishment Republicans, have forgotten that it's really what happens afterwards that's most important to
Absolutely.
the voters after they've been put in, and we're seeing disgusting results here in New Hampshire because of what's happening in the New Hampshire House, for instance. The other thing is, we've been told over and over for decades, vote for us. We're better than the Democrats. Well, the problem is that the party has become wants to be an obligation that any Republican must support the candidate.
Right.
I'm trying to change that to, it's more of a case of, it's my vote. With everything else going on, my vote is almost the only thing left of being of value as being a
Right.
citizen. I'm going to change that model to that of being a consumer marketplace. I spend my money only when I think I'm going to get value. If I cannot get value with a political candidate, even if it is the nominee, I'm not going to spend it. If you're going to make fun of me, like a lot of establishment Republicans do as a Tea Party type person, if you're going to call me a tea bagger, if you're going to insult me by saying you support Second Amendment rights, if you're going to go to the left in this last election like Scott Brown did and say, I'm going to out-abortion Jean Shaheen just to get those things, I'm not going to vote for
Right.
you. And I am glad to say that with our vote for John Langdon, vote for John Stark campaign, the top two ticket holders here in New Hampshire lost because we deemed them not worth our votes. That withholding our votes is just as important as voting for somebody.
Well, I think,
And I think, I would put that up against your paradigm of talking about, and you're certainly looking at it at the national level. But I think until we can change it at the personal level, and we did a pretty good job here all the way around, Aaron's emphasis helped a lot here in what you did. A lot of the Second Amenders, the pro-life folks, and, a lot of the conservative part said, if you're going to diss us, you're not going to win.
well, and that's why I think, Skip, you're right in the sense that part of this is who we nominate, right? I mean, the party process is such that the nominating process gives us someone we put forward, and if conservatives, libertarian, liberty-type candidates don't, or supporters don't have a candidate they can support, then they stay home. And I think that the process has been skewed against us. Look, I've been very active in the conservative libertarian movement all my life, and I am also what would be considered an establishment Republican, although I am probably one of the most conservative libertarian establishment Republicans you have out there. But having said that, how many of our peers, how many of our friends stay home for the exact reasons you're talking about? There's not a passion there. When I first got involved in politics back in the early or late 70s, early 80s, there was a congressman named Phil Crane from Illinois, and he came and spoke at the University of Michigan where I went to school. And he stood up there and he said, I'd rather stand on my principles and lose than lose my principles and win.
Well, I think the Republican...
And we need 400 of those.
Right.
I think
and that's what got me involved.
But I think we're getting to the point where the Republican Party is starting to learn that lesson, that if you do not stand on your principles,
Right.
you are going
You're
to
gonna lose anyways,
lose.
right.
And we've proved that here in New Hampshire. I think that we have seen that with that Presidents Dole and Ford and we can
McCain
keep on,
and Romney, exactly right, sure.
We can do that. We can see that pattern happening. Will the Republican Party learn from those mistakes, or are they going to scapegoat somebody else? And I think it's not so much that the Republican Party is not a national party, it's not recognizing it can be, but not when it disses its base. And you're
Agreed
seeing
100%.
that just all the time now.
That's why I'm backing Ted Cruz. I mean, look, I want a courageous conservative. I don't need a compassionate conservative. I don't need somebody who kind of comes. I can tell you 99.9% of the time where Ted Cruz is going to stand on an issue, and I have no problem with that.
And I said that during this last election. I'm going to cast my vote for somebody for whom I don't have to worry how their vote's
Right.
going to go.
Right.
I don't want to have to do like I do here in New Hampshire. How is this person going to vote? How is this person going to vote? I don't want to worry about that.
Right.
And if I can't get that person, then they're not worth my vote. And yes, well, then the Democrats will win. Well, you know something? The way that things have gone here in the New Hampshire State Senate, where we got lied to our faces, what's the difference between the Democrats and the Republicans? The Republicans are the ones who gave us Medicaid expansion, even as they try to tell us, well, it's not Obamacare Medicaid expansion. Oh, give me a break. A rose is a rose by any other name, and so's a pig. And you guys acted like it, and that's what we've gotten.
And they and then we get the Democrat-sponsored speaker in New Hampshire, and we now find out that, to all intents and purposes, Boehner is a Democrat-sponsored speaker in D.C.
And then the Republicans wonder, well, why aren't they enthused about voting for us?
Right.
But, it is what it is. Aaron, you're just kind of sitting there. Speak up, man. You've got a great viewpoint.
Tell us what you're doing here, Aaron. Aside from wandering around, you said you were sponsoring some of the events, and you say you're launching a competition. What are we competing for? Who's competing?
It's the 2015 Atlas Shrugged Crony Awards. And so we're trying to identify the worst examples of crony capitalism. So as to the discussion of, I don't think we should have mob rule one way or the other, whether it's the nation level or battleground states. I think crony capitalism is one of the biggest problems that we have. It's the government, whether it's steel tariffs or Medicare Part D. I mean, all of it is an example of the government intervening in the economy in a very unproductive way. And so we launched this contest where we allowed people online to submit nominees, and we now have 139 candidates, and we're going through our primary voting. And we have 4 categories of cronies. So politicians, individuals, corporations, and government entities. And at the end, we're going to have 4 winners, 1 in each category. But you can cast your vote in the primary now, between now and April the 15th. And then we'll have another round of voting from April the 15th to June the 1st.
So this would be kind of like one of the famous national events. Instead of the Tony Awards, we have the Crony Awards.
Exactly.
And what kind of statue are you going to present to the winner?
I'm not sure about the statue yet, but we're going to do a video at the end. And we have a website where we're crowdsourcing research on each of these cases. People can earn points for submitting articles and reviewing articles.
Oh, this is fabulous. Do you want to send us a little piece about this? We'll post it.
Actually, I
Absolutely.
did post it when he first came out with it, and I did
wow.
put up a post for it. I'm going to have to resurrect and bring that bump that
Cool.
post up and update it. But yeah, that would be a cool thing to do.
That tells you how bad my work schedule's been lately.
And it was rather interesting when Occupy Wall Street was really a big deal. They lambasted crony capitalism, and the same thing that the Tea Party was doing.
Right.
The problem was the remedy. Tea Party wanted free markets. Get government out in a lot of cases. Yes, some regulation for some bad actors is probably a good thing, but certainly it's way over-regulated. As we were talking about earlier, Steve, help me out here. Who was the state senator who wanted the contraceptives listed that was in the... David Pierce, the Democrat, wanted all the contraceptives that were in the company's health plan listed on the job application so that stupid women would understand. And I put stupid only because he must think that they are. I mean, that kind of regulation is just plain nuts. Occupy Wall Street said the problem is with the companies. Tea Party said the problem is with government. And I still take issue with the Occupy type folks and Elizabeth Warren with her Warrenism. It's really a case of you get crony capitalism when government gets too big and there's too many nooks and crannies to be able to look into and do those deals. You want to get rid of crony capitalism? Put government into that burlap bag, tie the rope around it, and throw it in the bathtub that's full of water. That's how you get rid of it.
Corporate welfare or cronyism is worse than traditional welfare. I mean, look, welfare was designed to help those who couldn't help themselves. Crony capitalism and corporate welfare is designed to help the powerful, who are more powerful than everybody else. And you take a look at what Barack Obama has done today, and this is, the people who, whether it's the solar-powered guys or all the guys who've gotten the subsidies, it's outrageous.
In fact, you could spin those phrases very nicely. So if welfare is to help those who can't help themselves, then crony capitalism is to help those who know how to help themselves.
Exactly. That's exactly it.
On the taxpayer dime, as we see with the Export-Import Bank.
Right.
With that going on.
That's, by the way, that got my vote on Aaron's poll.
Another really egregious piece of government that needs to be shut down. Like most of it does, frankly. There's all these people trying to find ways to get money out of politics, the New Hampshire Rebellion, the May Day PAC, and all these things. and they're all basically trying to use government to fix government one way
Right.
or another. And personally, I believe that what we need to do is put government back into its box and nail the lid on, and then put chains around it, and finally put the silver stake through the middle.
Well, I just want to say, if it was interesting as we talk about what role government has. You know, if you get away from those of us who are kind of passionate about politics and go back to your church and go back to your communities, I mean, most of our friends, at least my friends, want good roads and good schools, but they want limited government, right? They want to pay the least amount in taxes, and there's certain things they're willing to accept. But they've gotten so frustrated with the system that they just believe there's nothing they can do to make a difference. And that's why encouraging, whether it's encouraging people to get involved in, in Michigan we have 118 Tea Parties today. 118. Because they're gathering around on specific issues that are passionate to them. It may be a zoning issue in a local area. It may be a tax issue at the state or whatever it is. And those kind of things are very helpful. And you want to draw people into the process than things that they're passionate about. And we've got to find the individual things, whether it's from a liberty standpoint or other standpoint, that make a difference. Andrew, how are you? I wish I was calling you governor my next visit. But it doesn't always work out that way.
Yeah. Well, we're going to see what happens, and it's just one of those deals. It's going to go on. I need to get more details. I'll go back and get that post back up, but let's. I'll get it updated for you, Aaron, because I think it's a good thing because we do need to highlight this stuff.
Well, the alarming thing is 18 to 29-year-olds identify more favorably with socialism than capitalism. This is the tragedy that we have to deal with. And so what we want to do is really highlight the differences and to kind of reclaim free market capitalism versus,
When we say we want to restore their opportunities, we don't want to restore their opportunities to take more money from the rest of us, because otherwise they'll never become the rest of us, because everybody will be impoverished.
Right. Yeah. The problem that we have to point out is if you take the power out of the capitalists to run their own companies, and we do have to keep saying, what is capitalism at its very lowest level? And we talked about that earlier today on the show.
It's the freedom of contract.
When you then take it away from the people running their own companies and put it in the hands of government, everything automatically gets politicized. Is that a good thing? Because, it's Barack Obama today. Hopefully it's Ted Cruz tomorrow. Do you want somebody who's just an elected politician telling, if you're the entrepreneur, how you're going to run your company? I don't think so. Right. And we'll just have to go from there.
And instead of telling you you're going to run it this way or you're going to run it that way, instead of having the Republicans argue that they can control things better, we want people arguing that they can control things less.
Right.
Correct.
Let the market work.
That's right. Well, Steve, I would normally say I would go ahead and do the jingle stuff, but I don't know how to use the new jingle. The old jingle box I know how to use, but not this one.
So, Aaron and Saul, we want to say thank you very much for coming on.
Yes.
GrokTV.